The icy water crashed against Tabitha Cole's face as the wood beneath her splintered, sending her tumbling into the merciless rapids of the American River. It was May 1854, and what should have been a routine crossing had become a desperate fight for survival. Frank Ironwood stood on the riverbank, his hands frozen mid-motion as he secured his horse. The scream had cut through the morning air like a knife, drawing his attention to the river where a woman's raft was being torn apart by the current. Without hesitation, he threw off his hat and gun belt, kicked off his boots, and dove into the churning waters. Tabitha felt her lungs burning as she resurfaced, gasping for air. The spring runoff had swollen the river to dangerous levels, and the makeshift raft she'd been assured would carry her safely across had betrayed her. Now, pieces of it swirled around her as the current dragged her downstream toward the rocks. Hold on. The deep voice barely registered over the roar of the water, but Tabitha turned to see a man swimming powerfully against the current, his determined eyes locked on hers. Frank fought against the pull of the river, each stroke bringing him closer to the woman. Her long auburn hair was plastered to her face, her eyes wide with terror. "Reach for me," he shouted, extending his arm as he finally drew near. Tabitha lunged toward him, her fingers clutching his forearm with desperate strength. The moment they connected, a wave crashed over them, pushing them under. Frank held tight, pulling her against his chest as they surfaced together. "I've got you," he said, his voice steady despite the exertion. "Don't fight the current. We'll ride it to that bend ahead and then make for shore." Tabitha nodded, too exhausted to speak. She felt the solid strength of his arm around her waist as they moved with the rushing water, his free arm cutting through the surface with powerful strokes. Minutes stretched like hours as they battled the river together. When Frank's boots finally touched the rocky riverbed, he stood, lifting Tabitha partially out of the water. They struggled together up the bank, collapsing on the grassy shore once they reached safety. "Thank you," Tabitha whispered, coughing up river water. "I would have died out there." Frank pushed wet hair from his face, his breathing ragged. "Name's Frank Ironwood, and you're welcome, Miss Tabitha Cole," she shivered, her soaked traveling dress heavy against her skin. "I was trying to reach Jamestown," Frank nodded, rising to his feet. "Well, Miss Cole, you've still got a ways to go, but let's get you dry and warm first." He extended his hand to help her up. "There's a trading post not far from here where we can get you situated." Little did either of them know that the river had changed the course of their lives forever. The trading post was a humble wooden structure with a slanted roof and a hand-painted sign that read "Whitaker's Goods and Supplies." Frank helped Tabitha up the steps, supporting her weight as her legs still trembled from the ordeal. Elmer Whitaker, a stout man with a gray-streaked beard, looked up from his ledger when they entered. His eyes widened at the sight of the drenched pair. "Good Lord, Ironwood, what happened to you two?" "Raft accident on the river," Frank explained, guiding Tabitha to a chair by the potbelly stove. "The lady needs dry clothes and something warm to drink." Elmer nodded, disappearing into the back room. His wife Martha emerged moments later, a kind-faced woman carrying a stack of folded clothes and blankets. "You poor dear," she said, helping Tabitha to her feet. "Come with me. We'll get you sorted out." In a small side room, Martha helped Tabitha out of her sodden garments. "That river's claimed many lives over the years," she said quietly as she handed Tabitha a simple cotton dress. "You're mighty lucky Mr. Ironwood was there. Is he from around here?" Tabitha asked, slipping the dry clothing over her head. Martha nodded. "One of the best ranchers in the county. Keeps to himself mostly since his wife passed 3 years back. Typhoid took her and their little one." Tabitha's heart constricted at this revelation. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Life's hard out here," Martha said matter-of-factly, "but he's a good man. Honorable." When Tabitha emerged from the room, she found Frank similarly changed into dry clothes, his tall frame dominating the small store as he spoke with Elmer. He turned at the sound of her footsteps, and for a moment, something flashed in his eyes before he quickly masked it. "Miss Cole," he said with a nod. "Feeling better?" "Much, thank you," she replied, her fingers nervously smoothing the borrowed dress. "Mr. Whitaker says you've a ranch nearby." Frank nodded. About 5 miles north of here. I was bringing supplies back when I heard you in the river. He hesitated. If you don't mind my asking, what brings a lady like yourself to these parts alone? Tabitha's expression tightened slightly. My uncle passed away 3 months ago. He left me his claim in Jamestown. I've come to either work it or sell it. Elmer and Frank exchanged glances. Mining claim? Frank asked. Yes, Uncle Theodore wrote that it was promising but required more development than he could manage at his age. Frank's expression darkened. Miss Cole, Jamestown isn't exactly welcoming to women alone, especially those looking to take over mining operations. I'm aware of the challenges, Tabitha replied, lifting her chin, but I have little choice. My parents died last year, and with Uncle Theodore gone, I have nowhere else to go. The determination in her voice seemed to affect Frank. He studied her for a long moment before speaking again. The bridge at Jamestown was damaged in the spring floods. That's why people have been using rafts. He ran a hand through his still damp hair. I'm heading that way tomorrow to deliver some cattle. I could take you along, help you get settled. Tabitha felt relief wash over her. That would be most kind, Mr. Ironwood. Martha approached with 2 steaming mugs. You'll both stay here tonight, she said decisively. No sense traveling when you're still half drowned. As darkness fell, Tabitha sat on the small cot in the Whittaker's spare room, brushing her hair with a borrowed comb. Her near drowning replayed in her mind, the terrifying moment when the raft had split beneath her feet, the roar of the water, the certainty that she would die. And then Frank Ironwood, appearing like some guardian angel to pull her from death's grasp. She heard low voices from the main room, Frank and Elmer discussing something in serious tones. Moving quietly to the door, she caught fragments of their conversation. Claims right next to the McAllister operation, Elmer was saying. Those vultures? Frank's voice was hard. They've been trying to drive out every independent miner in the valley. Precisely why you ought to make sure the lady knows what she's getting into. Tabitha stepped back from the door, her heart racing. She'd known coming west wouldn't be easy, but she hadn't anticipated the specific dangers awaiting her. Still, she hadn't traveled 2,000 miles to turn back now. Morning broke clear and cool. Frank had his wagon ready at dawn, 2 strong draft horses harnessed and waiting. He helped Tabitha up to the seat, his hand warm and steady against hers. It's about 4 hours to Jamestown, he explained, climbing up beside her. Roads rough in places. Tabitha nodded, adjusting her borrowed bonnet against the rising sun. Her salvaged carpetbag, the only possession recovered from the river, sat at her feet, containing little more than her papers and a waterlogged daguerreotype of her parents. As they pulled away from the trading post, Martha pressed a packet of food into Tabitha's hands. You come back and visit when you're settled, she insisted. The wagon rolled along the dusty trail, each wheel rotation carrying Tabitha further into her uncertain future. Frank handled the horses with quiet confidence, his profile strong against the backdrop of pine-covered hills. Mr. Ironwood, Tabitha began after they'd traveled some distance in companionable silence. I couldn't help overhearing your conversation with Mr. Whittaker last night about the McAllister operation. Frank's jaw tightened. Eavesdropping, Miss Cole, gathering information, she corrected. If I'm to make wise decisions about my uncle's claim, I need to know the circumstances. A reluctant smile tugged at his lips. Fair enough. He adjusted his grip on the reins. The McAllisters came to these parts about 5 years ago, started buying up claims, some legally, others through persuasion, threats, and worse. Frank's eyes narrowed. They've got about 20 men on their payroll, not miners, hired guns mostly. They want to control the entire creek. Tabitha absorbed this information, her mind racing. And my uncle's claim sits on a bend in the creek that the McAllisters want badly. It's one of the few they haven't managed to acquire. Frank glanced at her. Your uncle was stubborn, refused to sell no matter what they offered. Then I shall honor his wishes, Tabitha said firmly. Frank shook his head. It's not that simple. They weren't happy with your uncle's refusal. If they learn a woman has inherited it, they'll think I'm an easier target, Tabitha finished for him. Yes, the wagon hit a rut, jolting them both. Frank steadied Tabitha with a quick hand to her arm. I'm not afraid of bullies, Mr. Ironwood, she said once they'd settled again. Frank studied her with newfound respect. Perhaps not, but you should be cautious all the same. They stopped at midday to rest the horses and eat the food Martha had packed. Sitting beneath the shade of a large oak tree, Tabitha found herself studying Frank as he checked the horses' hooves. There was something reassuring about his methodical movements, the confident way he handled the animals. "You've been very kind to me, Mr. Ironwood," she said when he rejoined her. "I'm not sure how I can repay you." Frank settled beside her, accepting the bread and cheese she offered. "No repayment necessary, couldn't very well leave you to drown." "Still, most men would have done their duty and moved on. You've gone well beyond that." Frank was quiet for a moment, chewing thoughtfully. "Maybe I know something about arriving in a strange place without allies." He met her eyes. "I came west 10 years ago with nothing but a horse and the clothes on my back. And now you have a ranch," pride flickered across his features. "Started with 10 acres and 3 cows. Now I've got 200 acres and a decent herd." He took a drink from his canteen. "It wasn't easy. Wouldn't have made it without help from folks like the Whitakers." "Your wife must have been very proud," Tabitha said softly, then immediately regretted bringing up what must be a painful subject. Frank's expression closed like a shuttered window. "She was," he stood abruptly. "We should get moving if we want to reach Jamestown before dark." The remainder of the journey passed with fewer words between them. Tabitha regretted her misstep, watching the scenery change as they traveled deeper into the gold country. The landscape became more rugged, dotted with makeshift camps and the occasional sluice box along creek beds where men worked tirelessly, driven by dreams of striking it rich. It was late afternoon when they crested a hill, and Jamestown came into view in the valley below. Unlike the idyllic picture Tabitha had imagined, the mining town was a haphazard collection of wooden buildings, canvas tents, and muddy streets bustling with activity. "It's not much to look at," Frank acknowledged, "but it's growing every day." As they descended into town, Tabitha became acutely aware of the stares directed their way, or more specifically, at her. Women were clearly a rarity here. She counted only 3 among the crowds of dusty, bearded men who stopped their activities to watch the wagon pass. Frank guided the horses to a stop in front of a 2-story building with Jamestown Hotel painted across its facade. "Best place for you to stay while you sort things out," he explained, jumping down from the wagon and coming around to help her. His hands spanned her waist as he lifted her down, and for a brief moment they stood closer than propriety strictly allowed. Tabitha felt a warmth rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. "Thank you again, Mr. Ironwood," she said, stepping back. Frank nodded, retrieving her carpetbag from the wagon. "I'll introduce you to Daniel Morgan. He's the assayer here and knew your uncle well. He can show you the claim tomorrow." The hotel's interior was surprisingly clean, if sparse. Mrs. Winters, the owner's wife, showed Tabitha to a small room on the 2nd floor, chattering excitedly about having another respectable woman in town. "Most females who come through are, well, not the sort one invites to tea," she explained delicately. After settling in, Tabitha rejoined Frank in the hotel's dining room, where Daniel Morgan was waiting to meet her. The assayer was a thin man with spectacles and a precisely trimmed beard who expressed genuine sorrow at Theodore's passing. "Your uncle was well respected here," he assured her. "His claim is promising. He found some good color last fall before the rains came." "The McAllisters have been asking about it," Frank interjected. Morgan's expression darkened. "Indeed, sent one of their men around just last week, wanting to know if anyone had claimed it since Theodore's passing." "Well, I have," Tabitha stated firmly, "and I intend to work it, at least until I determine its true value." Both men looked at her with expressions ranging from admiration to concern. "It's hard work, Miss Cole," Morgan warned, "and dangerous too, especially for a woman." Tabitha finished. "I'm stronger than I look, Mr. Morgan, and I'm quite capable of learning." Frank leaned forward, his voice low. "The issue isn't just the physical labor, Miss Cole, it's the McAllisters. They don't take rejection well." "Then perhaps they should learn that not everything is for sale," Tabitha replied. A smile tugged at Frank's lips despite his concern. "You remind me of your uncle. He said something similar when John McAllister offered him $5,000 for the claim." 5,000. Tabitha's eyebrows rose in surprise. "That was a small fortune." "It's worth more," Morgan said quietly. "Much more, potentially. There's a reason they want it so badly." After dinner, Frank announced he needed to return to his ranch. "I've got hands expecting me with supplies," he explained. "But I'll return in a few days to check on you." Standing on the hotel's porch, Tabitha felt a strange reluctance to see him go. In just one day, Frank Ironwood had become her anchor in this unfamiliar world. "I appreciate all you've done, Mr. Ironwood." Frank studied her face in the fading light. "Be careful, Miss Cole. Don't go to the claim alone. Wait for Morgan to accompany you." He hesitated, then added, "And if you need anything at all, send word to Ironwood Ranch." Tabitha nodded, watching as he climbed into his wagon. As he flicked the reins and the horses pulled away, she couldn't help wondering if she would see him again. The next morning, Daniel Morgan arrived as promised to escort Tabitha to her uncle's claim. They traveled by mule, following a narrow trail that wound along Jamestown Creek. "Your uncle's parcel is about 2 miles from town," Morgan explained as they rode. "It's a good location, water year-round and easy access." Tabitha took in the scenery, noticing the increasing evidence of mining activity as they proceeded. Abandoned equipment, crude sluice boxes, and the distinctive scars of the land where men had diverted water and dug into hillsides. They rounded a bend in the creek, and Morgan pointed ahead. "There it is, Cole's Bend, as the locals call it." The claim was a modest operation, a small cabin perched on higher ground, a partially constructed water wheel, and the tools of the prospector's trade scattered about. Despite its simplicity, Tabitha felt an immediate connection to the place. This had been her uncle's dream, the future he'd imagined for himself. As they dismounted, a voice called out from the trees. "Well now, what have we here?" 3 men emerged from the tree line, their postures casual but their intent clear in the way they positioned themselves between Tabitha and Morgan and the cabin. "Miss Cole is Theodore's niece," Morgan explained, his voice remarkably steady. "She's inherited the claim." The tallest of the 3 men removed his hat, revealing sandy hair and cold blue eyes. "Is that so? Name's Patrick Riley. I work for Mr. McAllister." His gaze swept over Tabitha, assessing. "He'll be mighty interested to meet the new owner." "I have no business with Mr. McAllister," Tabitha replied coolly. Riley's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Everyone in these parts eventually has business with Mr. McAllister." He gestured around. "This is a dangerous place for a lady. Accidents happen all the time." The threat hung in the air between them. "Are you finished, Mr. Riley?" Tabitha asked, holding his gaze. "Because I'd like to inspect my property now." Riley's expression hardened momentarily before he forced another smile. "Of course, just being neighborly." He settled his hat back on his head. "We'll be seeing you around, Miss Cole." As the 3 men sauntered off, Tabitha released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "That was ill-advised," Morgan murmured. "Riley is McAllister's enforcer. What would you have me do? Cower?" Tabitha's hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained firm. "I won't be intimidated off land that rightfully belongs to me," Morgan sighed. "Let's look at what you've got here then." The inspection revealed both promise and problems. The cabin was sound but needed repairs. The mining equipment was serviceable, but required at least 2 people to operate efficiently. Most encouraging were the samples of ore Theodore had collected before his death, which Morgan examined with expert eyes. "There's definitely gold here," he confirmed. "But extracting it will take work and investment." By the time they returned to town, Tabitha had formulated a plan. She would stay in Jamestown, hire help to work the claim, and use whatever profits came to improve the operation. It was risky, but the alternative, selling to McAllister and returning east defeated, was unthinkable. Over the next few days, Tabitha established herself in the community. She moved from the hotel to her uncle's cabin, despite Morgan's concerns for her safety. She hired a young miner named Thomas to help with the heavier work, and she began learning the basics of prospecting. True to his word, Frank Ironwood returned to Jamestown 5 days after leaving her. Tabitha was in town purchasing supplies when she spotted his wagon rolling down the main street. Her heart gave an unexpected leap at the sight of him. Frank pulled up beside her, his expression a mix of concern and relief. "Miss Cole, you're looking well, Mr. Ironwood. What a pleasant surprise." She smiled up at him, suddenly conscious of her practical but unflattering work clothes and the smudge of dirt that likely adorned her cheek. Frank jumped down from the wagon. "I brought some things from the ranch I thought might be useful." He nodded toward several crates in the back. "Preserved food, some tools, a good lock for your cabin door." Tabitha was touched by his thoughtfulness. "That's extremely kind, but you needn't trouble yourself." "It's no trouble." His eyes held hers. "Morgan told me about your encounter with Riley." Tabitha sighed. "Word travels fast." "It's a small community." Frank's expression darkened. "Riley's dangerous, Tabitha. All of McAllister's men are." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and the intimacy of it sent a small thrill through her despite the seriousness of the conversation. "I'm being careful," she assured him. "I've hired help and I keep a rifle by the door." Frank didn't look convinced. "Have you considered my offer? My foreman's wife is looking for household help. You could stay at the ranch, earn good money, and be safe." Tabitha felt a flash of irritation. "I didn't come all this way to become someone's housekeeper, Mr. Ironwood. I came to make something of my uncle's claim of my claim." Frank ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I'm trying to help you, and I appreciate it, but I need to do this." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a large carriage drawn by 4 magnificent horses. It came to a stop directly in front of them, and a man in his 50s with a well-groomed beard and expensive clothing stepped down. "John McAllister," Frank murmured to Tabitha. McAllister approached them with the confidence of a man accustomed to deference. "Miss Cole, I presume?" His smile was practiced, his handshake firm. "I've been looking forward to making your acquaintance." "Mr. McAllister," Tabitha acknowledged coolly. McAllister's eyes flicked to Frank. "Ironwood, didn't expect to see you in town." "Just delivering some cattle," Frank replied, his posture subtly shifting to place himself slightly in front of Tabitha. "Indeed." McAllister turned his attention back to Tabitha. "Miss Cole, I'd be honored if you would join me for dinner this evening." "I have a business proposition that might interest you." Tabitha hesitated. Refusing outright seemed unwise, yet accepting felt like walking into the lion's den. "I'd be happy to discuss business, Mr. McAllister," she said carefully, "but perhaps in a more public setting." "The hotel dining room, perhaps?" McAllister's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "As you wish. Shall we say 7 o'clock?" After McAllister departed, Frank turned to Tabitha with concern etched on his features. "You shouldn't meet with him alone." "I won't be alone. It's a public dining room." Frank shook his head. "I don't like it." "Neither do I," Tabitha admitted, "but refusing him outright would only make things worse." She laid a hand on his arm. "Don't worry, I have no intention of selling, no matter what he offers." That evening, Tabitha dressed in her best and only good dress, a deep blue affair that had somehow survived the river mishap by virtue of being safely packed in her trunk, which had been sent ahead to Jamestown. She arranged her hair carefully, aware that appearance could be a form of armor. When she descended to the hotel dining room, she found not only John McAllister waiting but also Frank Ironwood, seated at a nearby table with Daniel Morgan. McAllister rose as she approached, pulling out her chair with practiced gallantry. "You look lovely, Miss Cole." "Thank you." Tabitha seated herself, nodding discreetly to Frank, whose eyes hadn't left her since she entered. Dinner proceeded with polite conversation about Jamestown's growth and Tabitha's journey west. McAllister was charm personified, sharing amusing anecdotes and asking thoughtful questions. Had she not known his reputation, Tabitha might have found him quite likable. It wasn't until dessert was served that he finally broached the subject of her claim. "I understand you've begun working your uncle's parcel," he said, sipping his wine. "Ambitious undertaking for a woman alone." "I'm not entirely alone," Tabitha replied. "I've hired capable help." "Young Thomas," McAllister smiled indulgently. "He's a good lad but hardly experienced, Mining is a complex business, Miss Cole. It requires capital, expertise, and sometimes protection. Tabitha met his gaze steadily. Are you threatening me, Mr. McAllister? Not at all. He looked genuinely surprised at the suggestion. I'm offering to buy your claim for a fair price, $7,000 more than enough to set yourself up comfortably, perhaps even start a business here in town. The amount was substantial, far more than she had expected. For a moment, Tabitha considered what such money could mean for her future. It's a generous offer, she acknowledged. McAllister leaned forward, sensing her hesitation. Your uncle was a good man, but stubborn. He never understood the benefits of consolidation. With proper investment, that creek could yield 10 times what individual miners extract. And all profits would go to you, Tabitha noted. That's business, my dear. His tone remained pleasant, but his eyes hardened slightly. Consider my offer carefully. These mountains can be unforgiving to those who overestimate their capabilities. From the corner of her eye, Tabitha saw Frank shift in his chair, clearly listening to every word. I appreciate your concern for my welfare, she said, keeping her voice even. But I'm not ready to sell. McAllister studied her for a long moment. I see. Well, the offer remains open. He signaled for the bill. Should you change your mind, you know where to find me. As he escorted her from the table, he added quietly, I admire your spirit, Miss Cole. But spirit alone won't protect you from the realities of this territory. After McAllister departed, Frank immediately joined Tabitha. What did he offer? He asked without preamble. 7,000, she replied, still somewhat dazed by the figure. Frank whistled low. That's significant. More than the claim is worth on paper. Which means he knows something we don't, Daniel Morgan interjected, joining them. The geological survey team that came through last month, they were very interested in the land around your claim. Tabitha frowned. You think there's more gold there than we realize? Or something else of value, Frank suggested. Either way, McAllister wants it badly. Tabitha's determination solidified. Then I definitely won't sell, Frank sighed, running a hand over his face. I was afraid you'd say that. He glanced toward the hotel entrance. I don't like leaving you alone with McAllister circling. I'll be fine, Tabitha insisted, though with less conviction than before. At least let me escort you back to your cabin tonight, Frank offered. I'd sleep better knowing you arrived safely. The ride to Tabitha's claim was quiet, both of them lost in thought as the moon illuminated the trail. Frank had insisted on bringing his rifle, which now rested across his saddle. When they reached the cabin, he insisted on checking the surroundings before allowing Tabitha to enter. The small structure looked particularly vulnerable in the moonlight, isolated from its nearest neighbors by at least half a mile. Everything seems secure, Frank said, returning from his inspection, but I still don't like you staying out here alone. Tabitha stood on the porch, reluctant to say goodnight. I appreciate your concern, truly, but this is something I need to do. Frank stepped closer, his expression serious in the dim light. Why is this claim so important to you? Is it just about the money? Tabitha shook her head. It's about honoring my uncle's dream, about proving to myself that I can make my own way in the world, she hesitated. When my parents died, everyone expected me to marry the first suitable man who asked to secure my future, but I want more than that. Frank's gaze softened. You remind me of Catherine, my wife. She had that same fire. He looked away briefly. I respected it in her. I respect it in you. Tabitha felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. Thank you for understanding. Their eyes held for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Then Frank stepped back, breaking the spell. I should go, but I'll check on you tomorrow before I head back to the ranch. As Tabitha watched him ride away, she felt an unfamiliar ache in her heart. In just a few days, Frank Ironwood had become important to her in ways she hadn't anticipated. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Tabitha was up early, determined to make progress on the claim before Thomas arrived to help. She was examining the water wheel mechanism when she heard approaching hoofbeats. Expecting Frank, she turned with a smile that quickly faded when she saw Patrick Riley and 4 other men riding into her camp. Morning, Miss Cole, Riley called, his tone falsely pleasant. Thought we'd stop by and see how you're settling in. Tabitha's hand moved unconsciously toward the cabin where her rifle waited. "What do you want, Mr. Riley?" Riley dismounted, sauntering toward her with calculated casualness. "Mr. McAllister was disappointed by your refusal last night. He sent us to sweeten the deal." The other men spread out, encircling her. One began examining the water wheel, while another kicked at her carefully arranged pile of ore samples, scattering them. "Please tell Mr. McAllister I'm not interested," Tabitha said firmly, taking a step back. Riley's friendly facade slipped. "That's not the answer he wants to hear, Miss Cole." He gestured around. "Be a shame if something happened to this place. Creek floods sometimes. Equipment gets damaged. Cabins burn." Tabitha's heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral. "Are you threatening me, Mr. Riley?" "Just explaining how things work out here." Riley moved closer. "A woman alone faces many dangers. McAllister's protection is valuable. She's not alone." The voice came from behind Riley. All heads turned to see Frank Ironwood sitting atop his horse, rifle aimed squarely at Riley's chest. Behind him rode Daniel Morgan and two other men Tabitha recognized from town. Riley's hand moved toward his gun, then stopped as Frank cocked his rifle. "I wouldn't," Frank advised coldly. "This doesn't concern you, Ironwood," Riley spat. "I'm making it my concern." Frank's aim never wavered. "Now you and your friends are going to mount up and ride out, and you're going to tell McAllister that Miss Cole's claim is off limits." The standoff stretched for several tense seconds before Riley finally shrugged, affecting nonchalance. "We were just leaving anyway." He backed toward his horse, never taking his eyes off Frank. "This isn't over." "For today it is," Frank replied evenly. Once Riley and his men had departed, Frank dismounted and strode to Tabitha, concern evident in his features. "Are you hurt?" "No, just shaken," she admitted. Frank turned to Morgan. "We need to talk to Sheriff Harding. This has gone far enough." Morgan nodded grimly. "Agreed, though McAllister has the sheriff in his pocket. Then we'll go over his head. The federal marshal is due in Columbia next week." Tabitha listened to their discussion with growing unease. "This is my fight, not yours," she interrupted. "I can't ask you to risk yourselves for my claim." Frank's expression softened as he turned to her. "You didn't ask, but McAllister has gone too far this time. He needs to be stopped before someone gets killed." That afternoon, a meeting was convened at the hotel. Word of the confrontation at Tabitha's claim had spread quickly, and several local miners had come to offer support. Many had their own grievances against McAllister, though few had dared to speak openly until now. "Safety in numbers," Morgan explained to Tabitha as more men filed in. "McAllister can intimidate individuals, but not the entire community." Frank took charge, organizing a schedule that would ensure Tabitha's claim was never left unattended. 2 men would stand watch at all times, rotating shifts to maintain constant vigilance. "This is too much," Tabitha protested. "You all have your own claims to work, families to feed." An older miner named Josiah Harris spoke up. "Miss Cole, your uncle stood with me when McAllister's men tried to run me off my parcel last year. We take care of our own here." Tears pricked Tabitha's eyes at this unexpected solidarity. "Thank you, all of you." As the meeting dispersed, Frank pulled Tabitha aside. "I've been thinking there might be a legal solution here." "What do you mean?" "Mining claims require active work to maintain ownership. If we can prove McAllister is using intimidation to prevent you from working your claim, the land office might intervene." Tabitha considered this. "We'd need evidence." "Exactly." Frank's eyes held a determined glint, "and I think I know how to get it." Over the next week, a careful dance unfolded around Tabitha's claim. McAllister's men maintained a watchful presence at a distance, while Frank and the other miners established their protective rotation. Tabitha continued her work, learning more about mining techniques from Josiah and the others who volunteered their expertise. Frank rode out to his ranch daily, but always returned by nightfall, often sleeping in his wagon near Tabitha's cabin. Their evening conversations stretched longer each night, ranging from childhood memories to dreams for the future. Tabitha found herself looking forward to these quiet moments more than she cared to admit. "Why did you come west?" She asked him one evening as they sat on her porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and crimson. Frank was silent for a moment, his profile strong against the fading light. After my parents died, there wasn't much left for me in Pennsylvania. My father's debts took everything. He smiled wryly. I figured things could only improve from there, and did they, eventually. His gaze turned distant. Met Catherine my second year here. She was teaching at the school in Sacramento. The fondness in his voice was palpable. She had no business marrying a half-broke rancher, but she said she preferred men with ambition to men with inheritance. Tabitha smiled at that. She sounds remarkable. She was. Frank's voice held both love and sorrow. When she got sick, there was nothing anyone could do. Typhoid was rampant that summer. He swallowed hard. Lost her and our daughter within a week of each other. Without thinking, Tabitha reached out, covering his hand with hers. I'm so sorry, Frank. He turned his hand to clasp hers, the simple contact conveying more comfort than words could express. They sat like that as darkness fell, connected by shared grief and something new growing between them. The next morning, Tabitha woke to the sound of raised voices. She quickly dressed and stepped outside to find Frank confronting John McAllister himself, who had arrived with Riley and several armed men. This has gone on long enough, Ironwood, McAllister was saying. The girl is being stubborn because you've filled her head with nonsense about the claim's value. The girl is standing right here, Tabitha interjected, moving to Frank's side, and capable of making her own decisions. McAllister turned to her, his expression a careful mask of concern. Miss Cole, I've increased my offer to $10,000. That's more than generous. Before Tabitha could respond, the sound of approaching riders drew everyone's attention. Daniel Morgan appeared, accompanied by a tall man wearing a marshal's badge. Marshal Jenkins, Morgan called out as they approached. Glad you could join us. The federal marshal surveyed the scene with experienced eyes, noting the armed men on both sides. What's going on here, McAllister? Just a business negotiation, Marshal, McAllister replied smoothly. Nothing that requires your attention. Is that so? Jenkins turned to Tabitha. Miss Cole, I understand you've had some troubles with your claim. Mr. McAllister's men have been threatening me, Marshal, Tabitha stated clearly. They've made it clear that if I don't sell, I might suffer accidents. McAllister's face darkened. That's a serious accusation without proof. We have proof, Frank declared, producing a letter from his pocket. This came from Miss Cole yesterday, a direct threat signed by Riley there. The marshal took the paper, reading it with a deepening frown. This constitutes criminal intimidation, McAllister. I knew nothing about this, McAllister protested, shooting a venomous glare at Riley. If Riley acted, it was without my knowledge. That's not all, Morgan added. We've collected statements from a dozen claim holders who have experienced similar threats, and there's the matter of the geological survey. McAllister's expression changed subtly at the mention of the survey. What about it? Jenkins asked. Morgan produced a document. The government survey team found evidence of a significant quartz vein running through this area. It appears to be centered right under Miss Cole's claim. Tabitha gasped. This explained McAllister's persistence and the escalating offers. There are legal channels for mining disputes, Jenkins stated firmly. Intimidation isn't one of them. He turned to Riley. You're under arrest for criminal threats. As the marshal moved to apprehend Riley, the man suddenly drew his gun. I'm not going to prison for doing my job. What happened next unfolded in heartbeats. Riley's gun swung toward Tabitha. Frank lunged forward, pushing her aside as the shot rang out. Both of them tumbled to the ground as return fire erupted around them. When the chaos cleared, Riley lay wounded. Two of McAllister's men had fled, and McAllister himself was in handcuffs, protesting his innocence, and Frank was bleeding. Frank, Tabitha cried, seeing the spreading crimson stain on his shirt. The bullet had caught him in the shoulder, a painful but not immediately life-threatening wound. I'm all right, he grimaced, trying to sit up. Just a scratch. Don't you dare minimize this, Tabitha scolded, tears threatening as she pressed a cloth against the wound. You could have been killed. Morgan quickly organized help, sending one man for the doctor while others secured the prisoners. As they waited for the doctor to arrive, Tabitha held Frank's hand tightly. "Why did you do that? Why risk yourself for me?" Frank's eyes, despite the pain, held her steadily. "Because in just 2 weeks, you've become the most important person in my life, Tabitha Cole." Her heart skipped at his words. "Frank, let me finish," he insisted. "I never thought I'd feel this way again after Catherine died. Didn't think I wanted to, but then you tumbled into that river and somehow into my heart as well." Tabitha felt tears spill down her cheeks. "You've become important to me too, more than I thought possible." When the doctor finally arrived, he insisted on moving Frank to town for proper treatment. The bullet was extracted, the wound cleaned and bandaged, and Frank was ordered to rest for at least a week. "He can stay at my hotel," Mrs. Winters offered. "We'll take good care of him." But Tabitha had another idea. "He'll recover at my cabin," she announced. When the doctor began to protest, she added, "I have nursing experience from the cholera outbreak in Boston. I know what I'm doing." The real reason, which she kept to herself, was simpler. She couldn't bear to be separated from him. The next few days established a new rhythm. Tabitha tended to Frank's wound, prepared meals, and continued to work her claim with the help of Josiah and the others. McAllister and Riley were transported to Sacramento to await trial, and Marshal Jenkins appointed a temporary sheriff to maintain order in Jamestown. As Frank recovered, their relationship deepened. They spoke of everything and nothing, sharing stories and dreams, discovering the surprising connections between their separate journeys west. "What will you do now?" Frank asked one evening, sitting on the porch where he had been moved to enjoy the fresh air. "With the court's vein confirmed, your claim is worth far more than McAllister offered." Tabitha sat beside him, thoughtful. "I'm not sure. I could sell to a larger mining company, one with the equipment to extract the quartz properly. Or you could form a partnership," Frank suggested. "Keep partial ownership while bringing in the expertise you need." "Is that what you do?" Frank smiled. "It's what your uncle would have done, I think. He was a businessman at heart." Tabitha nodded slowly. "A partnership would allow me to stay in Jamestown." "Is that something you want?" Frank's question held deeper meaning than its simple words suggested. Tabitha met his gaze directly. 2 months ago, I had nothing keeping me anywhere. Now I have reasons to stay." Frank reached for her hand, his touch sending warmth through her entire body. "Tabitha, I know it's probably too soon, but I need you to know how I feel." "Frank, I love you," he said simply. "I didn't expect it, wasn't looking for it, but there it is. I love your courage, your determination, your kindness." Tabitha felt tears well in her eyes. "I love you too," she whispered. "It terrifies me how quickly it happened, but I can't deny it." Frank's smile was radiant as he gently pulled her closer, his good arm encircling her waist. Their first kiss was tender, a promise exchanged without words as the sun set behind the mountains. By the time summer turned to autumn, much had changed in Jamestown. McAllister was convicted and his assets seized, with many of the claims he had acquired illegally returned to their original owners. Tabitha had formed a partnership with a reputable mining company from San Francisco, retaining 30% ownership of what was now called Cole's Consolidated Mining. And on a perfect October day, with the aspen trees glowing gold against the blue sky, Tabitha Cole became Tabitha Ironwood in a ceremony attended by the entire town. The celebration that followed lasted well into the night, a testament to how beloved the couple had become in the community. As they danced under the stars, Frank pulled his bride close. "Happy," he murmured against her hair. "Beyond words," Tabitha replied, her eyes shining, "though I never imagined my journey west would end like this." Frank laughed softly. "When I pulled you from that river, I was just trying to save your life. I had no idea you'd end up saving mine." Tabitha smiled at the memory that had brought them together. "That river changed everything." "No," Frank corrected gently, "you changed everything. The river was just the beginning." 5 years later, Frank and Tabitha stood on the porch of their expanded ranch house, watching their 3-year-old son Theodore chase butterflies while their infant daughter Catherine slept in Tabitha's arms. The Ironwood Ranch had prospered, now encompassing over 500 acres. Tabitha's mining interests continued to yield impressive returns, much of which they invested in improvements to Jamestown itself, including a proper school and a small hospital. "Any regrets?" Frank asked, his arm wrapped around her waist as they enjoyed the peaceful evening. Tabitha leaned into his embrace, content beyond measure. "Not a single one," she replied with absolute certainty. From disaster had come deliverance. From a broken raft in treacherous rapids had emerged a love strong enough to withstand any current. And together they had built a life richer and more rewarding than either could have imagined alone. "I was thinking," Frank said, breaking their comfortable silence, "we should teach Theodore to swim this summer. The swimming hole on the south pasture would be perfect." Tabitha laughed. "As long as you promise to fish him out if he gets in trouble." Frank pressed a kiss to her temple. "Always, my love, just as I did for his mother." As the sun set on another day in their shared life, Tabitha reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had come west seeking only an inheritance, never imagining she would find a home, a family, and a love that had changed her forever. Sometimes, she thought, life's most dangerous currents could carry you exactly where you were meant to be.